Marder 3 was the name for a series of World War II German tank destroyers which mounted a modified ex-Soviet field gun or a German 7.5 cm Pak 40 in an open-topped fighting compartment on the top of the chassis of a Czechoslovakian Panzer 38T tank. They offered little protection to the crew, but added significant firepower compared to contemporary German tanks such as the Panzer III medium tank. It is not surprising that these tank destroyers suffered record losses during the war. Even in the early stages of Operation Barbarossa, the German army felt the need for a mobile and powerful anti-tank weapon. This need became more and more urgent as the early German anti-tank guns failed to penetrate the armor of new Soviet tanks such as the T-34. As an interim solution, it was decided to use captured and obsolete tanks in surplus, such as the Panzer 38T, as the base for the production of makeshift tank destroyers. A decision to design a tank destroyer using the Panzer 38 chassis was made in December of 1941. The task of converting the gun was given to the Rheinmetall Borsig Corporation. A gun shield was added to protect the crew not only from the front, but partially from the sides. The designers were forced to make a massive, cross-shaped mount and attach it to the front plate and sides of the turret platform. Like with the earlier German tank destroyers, the fighting compartment was partially on top of the engine deck. It is very hard to call this solution ideal, since the overall height grew to 2.5 meters. At a meeting in May of 1942, Hitler declared that the Panzer 38 was obsolete and that only tank destroyers should be built instead of these tanks, which were later called the Marder 3. It was also decided that at least 20 tank destroyers should be built every month. The new vehicles began to enter service in May of 1942. Unlike the Marder II, these vehicles were sent to the Panzer divisions and not to the independent army-level anti-tank battalions. Panzerjäger Company Selbstfahrerfette, or self-propelled anti-tank companies, were formed in the anti-tank battalions of the Panzer divisions and equipped with 2 and later 3 platoons, so 6 or 9 Marder 3 tank destroyers. Both the regular army and the Waffen-SS tank divisions fielded such companies. The problems were the same as with the earlier tank destroyers. The tall vehicle made an excellent target, and the armor offered little protection. Many complaints were made regarding the location of the ammunition as well. At certain traverse angles, the gun and shield covered the ammunition racks. Many complaints were also made about the travel lock as well. But there were positive feedbacks as well. The armor-piercing shell easily punched through the front of the KV-1 heavy tank from 350 meters, and this was not the limit. The vehicle was mobile, had a good suspension, and did not make much noise. Significant issues were only faced in North Africa. Despite the conversions made for hot climates, the vehicles were ill-suited for this theater. The engines suffered the most and broke down very often. Using the ex-Soviet Pak-36R as a main weapon of tank destroyers was a half measure. The biggest issue was with this gun that the number of available guns was limited. Production of the gun ended before the war, and no new batches of trophies could be expected. The German designers understood this perfectly, and the question of rearming the tank destroyer was raised as early as March of 1942. At the same meeting where Hitler questioned the further production of the Panzer 38, he also raised the issue of producing the tank destroyer armed with a German 7.5 cm Pak-40 gun. The calculations showed that there would be no issue with installing this gun. A prototype of the vehicle passed trials by the end of June of 1942. The new version was built with the requirement to avoid changes to the Panzer 38 chassis, but the fighting compartment was completely different. Instead of a mobile shield, a casemate was installed, open from the rear and partially from the sides and the top. This design was much more effective at protecting the crew from small arms fire. The mount used in the Pak-40 remained, but was reduced in size. The amount of ammunition carried increased to 38 rounds, and, in addition, extra crates could fit on the platform installed above the engine compartment. The platform was built in such a way that it did not impede the servicing of the engine. Production could not start until November of 1942, and these new tank destroyers entered service in January of 1943. This time the vehicles were also used in tank destroyer battalions that were part of infantry divisions. These vehicles participated in Operation Citadel, which had a great impact on their numbers. It is hard to say how many vehicles survived until the end of 1943. Later, the factories received an order for the development of the Motor vorn, or engine in the front tank destroyer, in February of 1943. The engine and the cooling system were moved to the front, and the driver's compartment was drastically reduced in size. The radio operator was removed, and the driver received a separate cabin. Moving the engine compartment forward allowed the creation of a roomy fighting compartment in the rear, which fit 3 crewmen, the commander, the gunner, and the loader. The production of these vehicles began in May of 1943. 20 vehicles were delivered in the first month of production, 45 in June, and 90 in July. The new tank destroyer appeared on the front lines towards the fall of 1943. The commander's version with additional radio equipment was also introduced in the summer of 1944. Its installation reduced the ammunition capacity by 26 rounds. In the second part of the war, the German army often treated their tank destroyers like tanks and used them to penetrate enemy lines. Considering the large silhouette and very thin armor of the Marder 3, it's not hard to predict the result of this use. Nevertheless, there were quite a few vehicles still in service by the end of the war. The aim to retain the chassis without serious changes led to a number of serious drawbacks, but the Marder 3 tank destroyer served until the last days of the conflict. I hope you enjoyed this episode, and to make sure you don't miss my future work, please make sure you're subscribed to my channel and press the bell notification button. Thank you, and see you in the next video.